Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are on ayah number 124 of Surah Al-Baqarah. قال الله تعالى وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ قال إني جاعلك للناس إماما قال ومن ذريتي قال لا ينال عهد الظالمين. From this ayah onwards, the topic changes to Ibrahim alayhi salam, which the Muslimin, the Yahud and Nasara agree was a prophet of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And the Quran will explain to us how Ibrahim alayhi salam was not a Jew or a Christian, but he was a true Muslim. So some key vocabulary here. Ibtala means to put to trial or fitna. Rabbuhu, his Rabb. Allah is the Rabb of all things, as we mentioned before in Surah Al-Fatiha. But the reason why he mentions the Rabb of Ibrahim here is because the Rububiyyah of Allah to Ibrahim is khas, a specific one, not a general one. Because Ibrahim a.s. had a special relationship with Allah, a relationship which no one else has attained apart from the last prophet. It says that Allah tested him with some words. فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ, then he made tamam, to complete something, meaning he fulfilled it. That is, he fulfilled the trial. But again, we find ourselves in the same problem, which is that we know what the words mean, but we do not know what they refer to. So what are these words that are referred to? When he says kalimat, what are these kalimat? When we look into the tafsir, we find that what this refers to are certain orders and prohibitions that Allah issued Ibrahim a.s. such as to abandon the disbelieving people who were polytheists. That includes his own father. And other things like disputing with Nimrud, who was the ruler of Babylon or Babel in Iraq, where Ibrahim a.s. originally was from. And this episode is going to be spoken of later on in the Quran. Also, when he was tested by being thrown into the fire, this is also going to be mentioned in the Quran. Also, from the trials migrating from his homeland, which is always going to be difficult. And from the trials is to host the guests. And possibly the most difficult one of them all, to slaughter his only son, Ismail alayhi salam. And this trial is also spoken of in the Quran. The name Ibrahim, and it can be pronounced Ibrahim as well, is a non-Arabic name, as Ibrahim was not an Arabi. At that time, Iraq was not an Arabic nation. It was not even called Al-Iraq. And the connection between the ayat of Ibrahim a.s. and the previous ayat of Banu Israel is that the Banu Israel claim to be following Ibrahim a.s. and that they love him and revere him. But Allah is telling us that if they were truthful, they would have accepted the last prophet, because the last prophet's message is precisely the same as the message of Ibrahim a.s. And the last prophet is also from Ibrahim's progeny through Ismail a.s. So they ought to be true to their integrity to Ibrahim a.s. by following the prophets from Ibrahim's progeny. Anyway, the ayah says that when he completed the tests, Allah says, I will make you an imam. So imam here means a leader, someone whom other people are going to follow. And of course, our prophet is ordered to follow the millah of Ibrahim. Ibrahim a.s. says, and also from my dhurriyyah, which means my progeny. And Allah responds by saying, yes, from your progeny there will also be prophets and righteous ones whom others are going to follow. However, he says that my ahad, which means contract, in this case it refers to the contract that Allah gives to another person, making him into a prophet and an example to be followed. So that contract will not be attained by the wrongdoers, the zalimin. And we have spoken about al-zulm before. Okay, let's reflect on this. What might we pick up? We can immediately pick up the virtue of Ibrahim a.s. simply by reading his name in the Quran. Allah Jalla wa Ala is mentioning his name in a positive light, and enough is that as a fadila. So we can pick up that he was indeed a great man and an example to be followed. There are other such people mentioned by name in a positive light, such as Luqman, who has a whole surah named after him. This is a fadila for such people. We may pick up also an incredible benefit, is that if you fulfill the orders and prohibitions of Allah Jalla wa Ala, and you pass the trials and tribulations that Allah puts you through to test your resolve and to test your integrity to Allah, then the result of that is that He makes you into an imam, a leader, or a goodly example for others to follow. Such is the honor attained by those who pass the trials and tribulations. We may also take the special relationship between Ibrahim a.s. and Allah, because Allah says Rabbuhu, his Rabb, denoting a special relationship. We can also take that, look how Ibrahim a.s. wants his progeny to be prophets and leaders as well. So he's thinking about his successors. And this is an idea we find in the Quran and the Sunnah, is that you make dua for your progeny. Ibrahim a.s. said, Rabbi ja'alni muqim as-salati wa min dhurriyati. O my Rabb, make me a person who establishes the salah, and make my progeny those who establish the salah. So the lesson is, make dua for your progeny. We can also pick up that the evildoers will never be prophets, and they will never be leaders who are followed, as in to say a goodly example to be followed. Such people, even if they are remembered, will be remembered negatively, not positively. Let's move on to ayah number 125. وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَّقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلًّى وَأَعِدْنَا إِلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ أَن طَهِّرَا بَيْتِيَ لِلطَّائِفِينَ وَالْعَاكِفِينَ وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ. Like we said, this topic is going to be about Ibrahim a.s. And because Ibrahim is the one who built the Kaaba with his son Ismail, the topic will be about the Kaaba and Makkah as well. Surah Al-Baqarah also goes on to make mentioning some rules and regulations of the Hajj, which is of course linked to the Kaaba. Here he says, when we made the Bayt. Bayt means house, but what it refers to here is the Kaaba. The word mathabatan, mathaba means a place of return. So the Kaaba is a place where people return to year after year, time after time. Wa amna, that means safety and security. So that is to say, there are no conflicts in this place. And even during the times of Jahiliyyah, a person who committed a crime could just come near the Kaaba and be safe. No one could harm him. So even in Jahiliyyah times, stuck out like a sore thumb, all around the Kaaba, people were being raided and killed and so on. But in the area of the Kaaba, it was completely safe. Simply incredible. And he tells us, take from the maqam of Ibrahim, which means the station or the place of Ibrahim, as a musalla, a place of prayer. So the musalla part, the place of prayer, that's easy enough to understand. But what is this maqam of Ibrahim, the place of Ibrahim? What's that all about? This refers to the stone on which Ibrahim a.s. would stand up to build the Kaaba. The Kaaba in its original form was not actually a high building. It was fairly short. But the actual stone is the standing of Ibrahim, because that's where he stood on. And it exists even today. It used to be close to the Kaaba, but Umar ibn al-Khattab, during his Khilafah, took it away from the Kaaba to make more space for the people making tawaf. There are also those scholars who say that the maqam of Ibrahim refers to all of the places of Hajj, because Ibrahim a.s. was the first to perform the Hajj, and so he stood on all of these masha'ir, the sacred places of the Hajj, like Mina and Muzdalifah and Arafah. But the first opinion appears to be more apparent, and Allah knows best. There is a weak hadith in At-Tirmidhi which says that the corner of the black stone and the maqam of Ibrahim are two pearls of Jannah, which Allah has wiped off their light, and if He did not wipe it off, they would light up what is between the east and the west. But that hadith is da'if, so we do not need to take it into account. He says, وَأَهِدْنَا إِلَى. So ahida ila means to give someone a firm order or a wasiyah. Ibrahim and Ismail, father and son, both prophets, alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Tahira is the fi'al amr, meaning to purify, so that is to clean the house. The bayti, my house, meaning the Kaaba and the surrounding area. So for whom should it be cleaned? لِلطَّائِفِينَ, from tafa yatufu, to circumambulate. So these are the people making tawaf. In other words, they were performing the Hajj. وَالْعَاكِفِينَ, which is to stay at a place. So they remain at this place, making dhikr of Allah Jalla wa Ala. وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ. Rukka' is one of the plural of raki', meaning to make ruku'. So these are people making ruku', and sajid is the one who makes the sajda. So sujood is one of the plural of that. So these are people making the sajda. In other words, they are performing the salah. So even in those days, thousands of years ago, during the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, their salah was making ruku' and making the sajda. Okay, let's reflect on this ayah. We take immediately the fadila of the Kaaba and the surrounding area, that this is a place where people will return to, and it is a place of security. We take the necessity of purifying places of ibadah, in other words the masajid, because they are for those who are praying, and those who are praying, they need a clean, pure, fresh smelling place to pray, because it attracts the people this way. Imagine the masajid were dirty and stinky. It will repel the people away, and then the masajid will become obsolete. We also take the obligation of taking the maqam of Ibrahim as a place of prayer. In the Hajj or the Umrah, after making the tawaf, it is recommended to pray 2 raka'at nafila at the maqam of Ibrahim. If you are unable to do so because of the crowd, then anywhere in the masjid would do. We may take that the i'tikaf, the salah, the Hajj used to take place even thousands of years ago. Actually, the background of this ayah is a demand which Umar radiallahu anh made. He suggested that the maqam of Ibrahim should be taken as a musalla, and Allah sent down an ayah confirming that indeed this should be the case. There are other occasions as well in which Allah Jalla wa Ala approved of what Umar was saying. A second occasion was when Umar suggested that the wives of the Prophet should wear the hijab, because any person, even an evil person, can look at them, and the wives of the Prophet have a special sanctity. And guess what? Allah Jalla wa Ala sent down the ayat of hijab. Umar also rebuked some of the wives of the Prophet because the Prophet was angry with his wives once, and he told them that if you do not do as you're told, Allah can replace you with other wives for the Prophet. And guess what? In Surah At-Tahrim, Allah verified what Umar was saying. And ayah number 126, وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّ اجْعَلْ هَذَا بَلَدًا آمِنًا وَارْزُقْ أَهْلَهُ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ مَنْ آمَنَ مِنْهُمْ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ قَالَ وَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَأُمَتِّعُهُ قَلِيلًا ثُمَّ أَضْطَرُّهُ إِلَى عَذَابِ النَّارِ وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرِ. Okay, so the vocabulary, Ibrahim is saying, Rabbi, my Rabb, ij'al, make, هذا, this, meaning the haram sanctity, baladan amina, a place of security. So balad means city. It's referring to the city of Makkah. Warzuq, from rizq, to grant provision. Ahlahu, its people, meaning those who are resident. Thamarat, plural of thamara, means fruit or fruits, which is the plural. Man amana minhum billahi wal yawmil akhir. So grant these provisions to those who have iman in Allah on the last day. We have spoken about the keyword iman. So here Ibrahim alayhi salam is making dua for the believing people of Makkah. And of course Allah answers this dua in the affirmative. However, He makes an exception. He says, وَمَنْ كَفَرَ, and the one who makes kufr, then to them also there will be provisions granted. As He says, فَأُمَتِّعُهُ, to give mata', which is provisions. قَلِيلًا, a little bit. Because if you have all the provisions you ever need, there will still be a little bit, because life is just a short life. So your provision will only ever be a little bit of provision, no matter how rich you are. ثُمَّ, and then, أَضْطَرُّهُ, from اضطرار, to force someone. It's from darura. So you will force him to the عذاب النار, punishment of the fire. وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرِ, Masir is the destination where you end up at. Bi'sa meaning what a bad. And bi'sa is a verb which only ever takes the past tense. Bi'sa meaning what a bad, and opposite to that is ni'ma, what a good. We also have other words, laysa meaning it was not, and asa meaning perhaps, as in hoping for. These verbs are called af'al jamida, solid verbs, because they are solidified, if you like, on the past tense. They never take a present tense. So we pick up from this ayah that Ibrahim a.s. is making dua to Allah. And this is a fadila of Ibrahim, that he turns to Allah for all his needs, because he was a true monotheist. And the whole practical benefit about showing us the fadila of Ibrahim a.s. is that we may take him as a practical example in terms of his sincerity and integrity to Allah Jalla wa Ala. Notice there's an interesting point. In the previous ayah, Ibrahim a.s. wanted his progeny to have the prophethood as well, and Allah made a takhsis. He made an exception. It is only for the believers. In this ayah, Ibrahim a.s. is asking for provision only for the believers, and Allah makes it general. He says, no, even the disbelievers will have a provision, but only for this life. But the difference between the believer and the disbeliever is that the provision of the disbeliever is a curse for them, because it is a means of punishment for them when they do not give thanks to Allah Jalla wa Ala. As for the believer, he gives thanks, and his rizq becomes a blessing. And from this ayah we can also pick up some aqidah points, that Allah Jalla wa Ala hears the dua, He answers dua, and He speaks, and we affirm the Yawm al-Akhir, and we affirm the fire. These are fundamental aspects of the creed. Wallahu a'lam.